how to verbally cite your sources during your presentation is crucial because you learn how to avoid plagiarism. So let's think. You have a written source versus a presentation. In the written source, again, you're able to look and see a partial citation with the information. And then you're able to go to a works cited page to easily go back and access information if need be. So you have multiple chances to understand what information goes with what source and how you need to go about finding the information. Presentations are very different. During a presentation, you must give a full citation. A full citation includes the author, the title, and the date. And you have to place that information within the body of the speech itself. You cannot wait till the end of your speech to rattle off your sources or to pop up a PowerPoint slide that has a list of your sources. You don't understand what information went with which source. So this is why those full citations embedded within the body of your speech is very important. Another difference, if you're looking at an essay, it's very easy to identify when you are quoting information verbatim from a source because you see the quotation marks. During a speech, you don't have that visual element, but you actually have to identify when a quotation begins and when a quotation ends. And we'll be giving some examples of that as we progress through the presentation here. So obviously you're going to use verbal citations so that you do not plagiarize. You need to use a source if it's not your original thought, if you're using a quote, paraphrasing information, or if the information is not widely or commonly known. And I always like to say, if you're in doubt, always cite your source. Now, there are 3 types of plagiarism that I just want to briefly go over. You have what is known as global plagiarism, where you take an entire work and you try to pass it off as your own. Second is patchwork plagiarism. Now, I want you to think of a patchwork quilt. You have different pieces of fabric that are sewn together to create one quilt. The same kind of idea applies to the plagiarism. You go and get information from a variety of sources, then you combine it together, and you try to present that end work off as your own. And then lastly, and the most frequently used, is incremental plagiarism. Incremental plagiarism is when you pull a sentence or two and try to pass it off as your own, or if you try to paraphrase the information or put the information in your own words and you do not attribute the source. Now again, the components of an oral citation include the following: author, title, date. All 3 must be present to be considered a full citation. So published sources are very easy. Published sources always have an author. You very easily know where the information came from, or the title of the source. And you always have a published date. So being able to create the verbal citations become very easy. And I'm just going to give the example here of the book. According to Rybecki and Rybecki, in their book Advocacy and Opposition, published in 2004, quote, "The ability to argue and the process of arguing is essential to our existence," end quote. Again, you're able to identify the author, the title of the book, the date it was published, But in that example, you are able to understand the information that I provided was pulled exactly from that book and inserted into my citation. Now, once you become comfortable with the citation process, being able to implement the author, title, date with your information, you need to start giving your citations based on the relevance of the information. So again, here's an example. If you obtain information that is very recent and it's the most up-to-date information out there, you'll want to cite or lead the citation with the date, because the date shows a lot of relevance and credibility to it. You'll want to use the author first if they're a renowned expert in the field. Or the title first if the title directly relates to your topic. Now again, a full citation is author, title, date. But let's say in your presentation you're going to use the same source multiple times. When giving your first citation of that source, you must give a full citation, author, title, date. But the second time that source is used, 2/3 of the information is significant or sufficient. Author, title, author, date, title, date. So here again is an example. According to Karen Rybecki and Donald Rybecki in their book Advocacy and Opposition, published in 2004, quote, "The ability to argue and the process of arguing is essential to our existence," end quote. Now if I'm going to use Rybecki and Rybecki's book again, according to Karen Rybecki and Donald Rybecki in their book Advocacy and Opposition, evidence is the foundation for building an argument. You know the source is being used again, but you're still able to identify the primary source with the information. It saves time. Now, internet sources become tricky. Anyone can post information to the internet. So before you use an internet source, you have to examine that source and the information provided to make sure that it's credible. The first thing to look at is the source type or the hosting website. Is it credible or unbiased? Wikipedia would not be a credible website. So it lowers your credibility as a speaker if you use that information. Or if you're going to use PETA's website, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, they're very biased with the information that they put out. Is the author listed? If so, that oftentimes gives a lot of weight to internet sources because someone is taking responsibility for the information published or posted on the internet. You'll want to look for validity. Does the source's content stay consistent throughout that web page? And then again, you'll want to look for the most up-to-date information. Now, we all know you can access books, journals, newspapers, magazines online. If you're accessing a published source or a hard copy source, something that you can actually go out, buy, and get your hands on it, but you're just looking at it on the internet, you will want to cite your source as a published source, not as an internet source. Now, if the information is not published in hard form, your citations are going to vary a little bit. If you're looking at the website and there's an author's name given, you'll want to use it. If you use an author's name, the title is the sponsoring website. Now, let's pretend that there is not an author behind the information given. If the author is not listed, the sponsoring website becomes the author. And if the sponsoring website is the author, the title now has to be the specific web page being viewed. Now let's think about date. Oftentimes you'll see a published or updated date given. If no such date is given, you'll need to use the retrieval date. And you'll need to be specific whenever you're referencing if it was a published or a retrieval date in your verbal citation. So here's an example. We're going to pretend that the author is given and a date is listed. According to David Goldman's report on September 25th, 2008, on CNN's website, the economic savings plan outweighs the effects of a recession. So the author and the date was both given in that example. Now, an author is not listed and the date or updated date is not listed. Your citation would go as follows. According to the CDC website, hosting website, MRSA in healthcare setting, the specific web page accessed, retrieved on October 3rd, 2007. Again, the retrieval date lets us know it's not the published date. MRSA most frequently occurs during invasive procedures. So internet citations can vary again depending on if the author is listed or if the title is listed. But what about if you're conducting an interview? If you're conducting an interview, you still follow the author, title, date guidelines. The author is the person that you interviewed. And you also have to let us know why you interviewed them. So if they're an expert in the field, you may want to include their title along with their name. Or if they have a lot of experience, you'll want to include the years of experience to accompany that person's name. The title is the subject that you discussed with them, and the date is the date the interview was conducted. So let's hear an example. In an interview with pediatric Dr. Karen Stolberg on the correlation between vaccinations and autism, conducted June 8, 2008, she stated that there are no findings that support a link between the two. Again, we understand that she is a pediatric doctor. We know we talked about vaccinations and autism, and we know the date the interview was conducted on. So last thoughts. Remember, you have to give verbal citations in your information. Always remember to use a full citation, author, title, date. If you are using the source multiple times, 2/3 of the citation is sufficient. And always remember, if you are in doubt, cite your source.